Hello and welcome back to her revenge arc. My name is Alara, and I am your storyteller. Tonight, I invite you to settle in, to dim the lights, and to listen. The story I have for you is not one of screaming matches or shattered glass. It is a story about the quiet, calculated dismantling of a life built on lies. It is about the profound betrayal that can only come from those we hold closest, and the precise, cold clarity that follows. It's a story about a wedding that never was, and a gift that was delivered with the coldest of intentions. It is my story. There is a particular quality to the light in late autumn, a kind of gilded melancholy that settles over the world just before the first frost. I remember that light so clearly. It streamed through the large bay window of our new home, the one Leo and I had bought together. It was the forever house, the place where we would fill photo albums and measure our children's heights against a doorframe. In that golden light, every dream felt not only possible, but inevitable. Leo. Even now, saying his name feels like speaking a foreign language I once knew fluently. He was, to me, the epitome of a safe harbor. He had a laugh that could coax the sun from behind the clouds, and a way of looking at me that made me feel like the only person in a crowded room. We met in a ridiculously cliché why I spilled coffee in a bustling downtown cafe. He insisted on buying me a new coat, I insisted it wasn't necessary, and we ended up talking for 3 hours until the staff politely asked us to leave. He was charming, intelligent, a successful architect who built beautiful, functional spaces. I thought he was building one for us, a life of elegant design and solid foundations. And then there was Clara. My best friend since we were 5 years old. When we solemnly swore an oath of eternal allegiance over a shared box of animal crackers. Clara was not my friend. She was my other half. She was the keeper of my secrets, the witness to my awkward teenage years, the anchor in every storm. She knew the cadence of my breathing when I was about to cry. She could finish my sentences before I even knew where they were going. Her family was my family and mine was hers. We were two vines so intertwined that it was impossible to tell where one began and the other ended. When Leo proposed on a windswept cliff overlooking the ocean at sunset, Clara was the first person I called. Her shriek of joy was so loud it distorted the phone's speaker. Finally, she had screamed. I was beginning to think he'd never get his act together. We have so much to plan. The we was not an assumption, it was a given. From that moment on, Clara became the unofficial, yet absolutely essential wedding planner. She was more excited than I was, if that were even possible. While I was floating on a cloud of romantic bliss, Clara was grounded, practical, and fiercely efficient. You can't just pick a venue, Alara, she'd say, her laptop open to a spreadsheet with at least 15 tabs. You have to consider the lighting for the photographer, the acoustics for the band, the seasonal availability of flowers, the cost per head for catering. She was a whirlwind of energy and organization. She spent hours with me, poring over bridal magazines, creating Pinterest boards, and touring venues. I remember one Saturday we spent visiting potential locations. The first was a grand ballroom in a historic hotel, all crystal chandeliers and gilded mirrors. Too stuffy, Clara declared, wrinkling her nose. This isn't you. It's beautiful, but it's cold. The second was a rustic barn, charming but a little too well rustic. Splinters in your wedding dress? I don't think so, she said with a dismissive wave. The third was perfect. It was a botanical garden conservatory, a magnificent glass house filled with exotic plants and orchids. It was elegant but alive, structured but natural. It was us. Or so I thought. We stood in the center of the main hall, sunlight filtering through the glass panes above, dappling the floor in patterns of light and shadow. This is it, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Clara came and stood beside me, slipping her arm through mine. I knew you'd love it, she said, her voice soft. I can just see it. You in your dress walking down this aisle. Leo waiting for you under that arch of white orchids. It's going to be magical. She was so invested. She helped me choose the photographer, a woman renowned for her candid, emotional style. Clara sat through the entire portfolio presentation, pointing out specific shots she loved. Look at this one, Alara. The way she caught the groom's expression. That's what we need. That raw emotion. She was there for the cake tasting, sampling a dozen different combinations of sponge, and filling with the seriousness that bordered on comical. The lemon and elderflower is a classic, but the raspberry and white chocolate is more decadent, she mused, a dab of buttercream on her chin. Let's go with the raspberry. It's more passionate. She was my fiercest advocate during the wedding dress appointments. I was overwhelmed by the sea of ivory lace and tulle. I tried on a dozen dresses, each one feeling like a costume. I was starting to lose hope when Clara pulled one from the back of the rack. It was simple, elegant, an A-line silk gown with delicate beading on the bodice and a low back. Try this one, she urged. I was hesitant, but I did. When I stepped out of the dressing room and saw myself in the mirror, I gasped. It was perfect. It was the dress I didn't even know I was looking for. My eyes filled with tears. I turned to look at Clara, and she was already crying. That's the one, she choked out, fanning her face with her hand. Oh, Alara, you look breathtaking. Leo is going to lose his mind. We hugged, a long, tight embrace amidst the pristine white dresses. In that moment, my heart was so full it felt like it might burst. I had the perfect man, the perfect dress, and the perfect best friend to share it all with. My life was a masterpiece, and every brushstroke was exactly where it was supposed to be. The deposits were paid. The contracts were signed. Clara's name was on almost as much of the initial paperwork as mine was, listed as the secondary contact, the wedding coordinator. She insisted, if you're on your honeymoon and a vendor has a final payment question, who are they going to call? Me. It just makes sense, honey. And it did. Everything she said made perfect logical sense. She had every vendor's number, every contract detail, every payment schedule memorized. The wedding was 6 weeks away, and thanks to Clara's meticulous planning, everything was humming along without a hitch. The invitations, which she had helped me design, had been sent. The RSVPs were pouring in. The foundation of my life felt like solid bedrock. I had no idea it was all just sand, waiting for the tide to come in. The betrayal wasn't a sudden dramatic revelation. It was quiet. It was insidious. And it came from a gift. A week before everything fell apart, Leo came home with the sleek white box. An early wedding present, he announced, a proud grin on his face. It was a high-end digital photo frame. I thought we could load it up with all our favorite pictures, he explained. It's cloud-connected, so we can add new ones from our phones anytime. I already created a shared album for us, Leo and Alara's journey. I put some of our first trip together on there to start. It was a thoughtful gift. I was touched. We set it up on the mantelpiece in the living room, and for the next few days it was a lovely silent slideshow of our history. Pictures of us hiking, laughing at a restaurant. A selfie from the day we brought home our golden retriever puppy, Sunny. It was a constant, gentle reminder of our shared happiness. The night I found out Leo was out of town. He was on a site visit for a new project in a city a few hours away. He was due back the next day. Clara was supposedly having a quiet night in. She'd texted me earlier. A picture of her cat curled on her lap. Movie night for one. Miss you. Can't wait for the final dress fitting next week. XO. I was alone in our quiet house, just me and Sunny. I made myself a cup of tea and settled on the sofa, scrolling idly through my phone. The digital frame on the mantel flickered, changing images every 30 seconds. A picture of us on a beach. A picture of me sleeping that he'd taken once, which I found both endearing and slightly creepy. A picture of him with his family. Then an image appeared that made me pause. It was unfamiliar. It wasn't from our trip. It was a close-up of a hand, a man's hand, resting on a woman's bare leg. The hand was wearing Leo's watch, the one I had bought him for his 30th birthday. The leg was I couldn't be sure. The photo vanished before I could fully process it. My heart gave a strange little flutter. That was weird, I thought. Must be a stock photo that comes with the frame. But it had looked so specific. Leo's watch was unmistakable. I put down my tea and walked over to the frame, my curiosity piqued. I tapped the screen to access the settings. The album it was currently playing was indeed Leo and Alara's Journey. But there was another album synced to the device, one I hadn't seen before. Its name was simple, almost sterile. Project Nightingale. Project Nightingale? It sounded like one of Leo's architectural projects. Maybe he'd accidentally synced the wrong folder from his work computer. A flicker of annoyance went through me. He was always mixing his work files with his personal ones. With a sense of detached curiosity, I tapped on the album. The first photo loaded. And the world stopped. It wasn't a blueprint. It wasn't a 3D rendering of a building. It was Clara. She was lying in bed, propped up on her elbows, looking at the camera with a sly, knowing smile. The sheets were pulled around her waist. Her hair was messy the way it gets after the way it gets. She was wearing nothing but the delicate gold necklace I had given her for her last birthday. My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't breathe. It felt as if a vacuum had sucked all the air out of the room. My hand still touching the screen started to shake. With a trembling finger, I swiped to the next photo. It was Leo and Clara. Together. In a hotel room I didn't recognize. He was standing behind her, his arms wrapped around her, his face buried in her neck. She was tilting her head back, her eyes closed in a look of pure ecstasy. It was a pose of such raw, stolen intimacy that it felt like a physical blow. Swipe. A picture of their intertwined hands, his watch next to her bracelet. The same picture that had flashed on the screen moments before. Swipe. A selfie taken by Leo. They were both in it, their faces close together, grinning at the camera. They looked happy, thrilled, like two people sharing a delicious, dangerous secret. In the background I could see the distinctive, ugly floral wallpaper of the motel just off the interstate. The one people go to when they don't want to be seen. Swipe. 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 Each photo was a new layer of hell. There were dozens of them. Photos taken over months. A picture of her feet propped on the dashboard of his car. A picture of them clinking wine glasses in a dimly lit bar I didn't recognize. A picture of her wearing his work shirt, laughing as she made coffee in a kitchen that was not her own, and not mine. The date stamp on that one was from a Tuesday 2 months ago, a day he told me he was working late at the office, and she told me she was taking a yoga class. My mind struggled to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. It was like watching a film of someone else's life. A twisted, parallel universe version of my own. This couldn't be Leo, my Leo, the man who wrote me little notes and left them in my coat pockets. This couldn't be Clara, my Clara, the woman who held my hand and cried with me at the thought of my future happiness. And yet, there they were. Undeniable. Irrefutable. Betrayal in high-definition color. I sank to my knees on the hardwood floor. A low guttural sound escaped my lips, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. Sonny, sensing my distress, came over and started whining, nudging my hand with his wet nose. I barely registered his presence. The gilded late autumn light that I had loved so much now seemed garish and mocking, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny particle of my shattered reality. The silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It was immense, suffocating. It was the silence of a tomb. I don't know how long I knelt there, on the floor of my forever house, staring at the smiling faces of the two people I loved most in the world as they systematically destroyed it. Time ceased to have meaning. There was only a before and an after. Before the Project Nightingale album, and after. The anger didn't come first. What came first was a profound, hollowing grief. It was a death. The death of my future, the death of my past, the death of the two most important relationships in my life. The Leo the first was going to marry was dead. The Clara who was my sister was dead. In their place were these two strangers on the screen, two cheap, common liars. Slowly, very slowly, a new feeling began to creep in, pushing aside the grief. It was cold. It was sharp. It was a feeling of absolute chilling clarity. The shock receded, and in its place, a strange calm descended upon me. It was the calm of a surgeon before a complex operation. The calm of a bomb disposal expert. My mind, which had been a chaotic storm of pain and confusion, suddenly became a quiet, orderly space. The question was no longer why. The why didn't matter. The only question that mattered now was what next? I stood up, my knees creaking. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of cold water, my hand perfectly steady. I thought about screaming. I thought about calling Leo and unleashing a torrent of rage. I thought about driving to Clara's house and confronting her. But what would that achieve? It would give them the satisfaction of my pain. It would be messy, emotional, and ultimately unsatisfying. They had operated in the shadows with secrets and lies. A loud public explosion felt beneath me, beneath the woman I was becoming in that very moment. No, their betrayal was a meticulously crafted project of deceit. My response would be equally meticulous. It would be a project of its own. It would be quiet, elegant, and devastating. I went back to the living room. I took out my phone and with a steady hand, I took a picture of every single photo in the Project Nightingale album. I saved them to a secure, password-protected folder on my own cloud drive. Then I went back into the photo frame settings and deleted the album. I unsynced it from the device and cleared the cache. I returned the framed slideshow to the Leo and Alara's Journey album. The image on the screen flickered back to a picture of us smiling on a mountaintop. The illusion was restored. The evidence was secured. The next few days were the most difficult performance of my life. I had to become an actress and the role was myself. The happy, blissfully ignorant fiancé. When Leo returned from his business trip the next afternoon, I greeted him at the door with a kiss. It was like kissing a marble statue. I felt nothing but cold stone. I forced a smile. "How was the trip?" I asked, my voice light and airy. "Long," he said, dropping his bag. "Productive, though. I missed you." "I missed you too," I said. The words felt like ashes in my mouth. I watched him as he moved around our home, our space. Every gesture, every word he spoke was now filtered through the lens of my new knowledge. When he said, "I'm exhausted," I heard, "I'm exhausted from lying to you." When he smiled at me, I saw the ghost of his grin in that selfie with Clara. He was a phantom, haunting the shell of the man I thought I knew. That evening we sat down to dinner. I had cooked his favorite meal. I played the part perfectly. I asked about his project. He spun a detailed, convincing tale of meetings and site surveys. He was a masterful liar. I had to give him that. I listened, nodded, and asked follow-up questions, all while my mind was a steel trap, cataloging every falsehood, every inconsistency. The true test came the next day when Clara called. Her voice was bubbly, overflowing with her usual infectious energy. "Alara. Hi. How are you? How was holding down the fort while the man was away?" she chirped. "It was fine," I said, keeping my voice even. "Quiet. Well, get ready for things to get loud. I just got off the phone with the florist. She has a question about the centerpieces. She's suggesting adding a touch of silver brunia to the arrangements for texture. What do you think?" I could hear her tapping on a keyboard. She was in her element. She was planning the wedding of her best friend. The wedding that would never happen, with the man she was sleeping with. The audacity of it was breathtaking. "Oh," I said, feigning thoughtfulness. "Silver brunia? That sounds interesting. What do you think, Clara? You have such a good eye for these things." "I think it's a brilliant idea," she said, her voice full of genuine-sounding enthusiasm. "It adds a modern touch without being too trendy. It'll look gorgeous with the white orchids in the conservatory. I'll tell her to go ahead with it." "Perfect," I said. "You're a lifesaver, Clara. I don't know what I'd do without you." The line was silent for a fraction of a second too long. "Of course," she said, her voice a little softer. "Anything for you. You know that." "I know that you are a liar," I thought. "I know that you are sleeping with my fiancé. I know everything." But I said, "I know. Talk soon." I hung up the phone and stood in the silence of my kitchen. The cold, calm resolve was still there, but it was now accompanied by a sense of profound loneliness. I was living on an island of truth in an ocean of their lies. I was the sole keeper of a secret that implicated the two most important people in my life. In the weeks that followed, I became an observer in my own life. I watched them together, Leo and Clara, at a dinner party with friends. I watched the subtle glances, the fleeting touches of hands under the table that I had always mistaken for the casual affection between a friend and her best friend's partner. Now I saw them for what they were. Tiny secret signals of a shared betrayal. They were so confident, so sure of my ignorance. They would joke with me, plan with me, all while carrying on their sordid affair right under my nose. Their arrogance was my greatest asset. The plan began to form, not in a flash of inspiration but piece by piece like a complex mosaic. The core idea was simple. They had, together, created this mess. They had, together, helped me build this elaborate, expensive fantasy of a wedding. It was only fair that they should be left with the wreckage. My revenge would not be emotional. It would be transactional. It would be administrative. I created a new spreadsheet on my computer. The title was Project Cancellation. It had tabs for every single vendor. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, the florist, the band, the dressmaker, the invitation printer. The first call was the hardest. It was to the Botanical Garden Conservatory, the beautiful glass house that was supposed to be the setting of my magical day. My heart ached as I dialed the number. A cheerful event coordinator answered. "Hello," I said, my voice clear and steady. "My name is Alara Vance. I'm calling regarding the wedding scheduled for November 18th. "Ah yes, Ms. Vance. We're so looking forward to it. Your coordinator, Clara, was just in touch last week about the final lighting plan." My stomach clenched. "Yes," I said. "About that. I'm calling to inform you that the wedding is cancelled." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Is everything all right?" "Circumstances have changed," I said, the phrase sounding both polite and chillingly final. "I understand that my deposit is non-refundable, and I'm aware there will be a cancellation fee as per our contract. Could you please forward me the final invoice for all outstanding charges?" "Of course," the woman said, her voice now hushed and professional. "I'll process that for you right away. Again, I'm very sorry." "Thank you," I said and hung up. One by one I made the calls. Each conversation was a small death, the dismantling of a dream. I spoke to the caterer and canceled the order for 150 guests, including the raspberry and white chocolate cake that Clara had insisted was more passionate. I spoke to the florist and canceled the white orchids and the silver brunia. I spoke to the band and canceled the set list that included our song. With each call, I requested a final, itemized invoice for all cancellation fees. The emails started to flood my inbox. The conservatory, $15,000 cancellation fee. The caterer, $12,500. The photographer, $5,000. The florist, $4,000. The number grew. A staggering monument to a future that would never be. The most painful part was the dress. I walked into the boutique, the same place where Clara and I had cried together. The owner greeted me warmly. "Alara, your final fitting is next week. Are you excited?" I took a deep breath. "I need to cancel the order," I said quietly. Her smile faltered. "Cancel? But the dress is almost finished. It's been altered to your specific measurements." "I know," I said, "and I will pay for it in full. I just won't be needing it." I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. I couldn't bear to see the pity in her eyes. I simply paid the remaining balance on my credit card, the full four-figure sum. I told her to keep the dress. Perhaps she could donate it to a charity for brides who couldn't afford one. It felt like the only good thing that could come out of this. Leaving the shop without the gown felt strangely liberating, like shedding a skin that no longer fit. I kept all of this a secret. At home, I continued to play my part. I talked to Leo about our honeymoon plans. I let Clara show me pictures of bridesmaid hairstyles. I was a ghost in my own life, watching the final act of a play where only I knew the ending. The strain was immense. I barely slept. I lost weight. When Leo commented on it, saying I was looking a bit thin, I just smiled and said, "Wedding stress, you know?" He nodded, oblivious. The irony was a bitter pill I swallowed every single day. Finally, the day came. It was a Tuesday, exactly 1 week before the wedding was supposed to take place. All the invoices had arrived. The final sum was significant. It was the price of a luxury car. The price of a down payment on another house. It was the price of their betrayal. That morning, I woke up before Leo. I went downstairs and made coffee, my movements calm and deliberate. The project cancellation spreadsheet was open on my laptop. Everything was in place. When he came downstairs yawning and stretching, I was sitting at the kitchen table. "Morning," he said, kissing the top of my head. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep," I said. I waited until he had poured his coffee and sat down opposite me. I truly looked at him for the first time in weeks. I tried to find the man I had fallen in love with, the man who spilled coffee on me and talked for 3 hours. He was gone. In his place was this weak, duplicitous stranger. "Leo," I began, my voice even. "We need to talk." His smile faded slightly. "Okay. Everything all right?" I didn't answer. Instead, I turned my laptop around to face him. On the screen was the first photo from the Project Nightingale album. The one of Clara in bed, smiling that secret, knowing smile. I watched his face. It was a fascinating, horrifying spectacle. The color drained from his cheeks. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Alara, what is this? Where did you get this?" he stammered, his hand shaking so much that coffee sloshed over the rim of his mug. "Does it matter where I got it?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Is it real?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The architect, the man of plans and structures, had no blueprint for this. He was utterly exposed. It's not what it looks like," he finally managed to say, the oldest, most pathetic lie in the book. "Really?" I said, and with the click of the trackpad I moved to the next photo. The one of them together, his face in her neck. "Then what exactly does this look like? And this?" Click. The selfie in the motel room. "And this?" Click. Her feet on his dashboard. I let him see a dozen of them, a silent, brutal slideshow of his duplicity. He stared at the screen, his face ashen. The confident, charming man I knew had crumbled. In his place was a small, guilty child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Alara, I can explain," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "There is no explanation," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a shard of glass. "There are only facts. And the fact is, you have been sleeping with my best friend. The fact is, you have been lying to me every single day for months. The fact is, the man I was supposed to marry doesn't exist." He started to cry. Pathetic, sniveling tears of self-pity. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "It was a mistake. Terrible, stupid mistake. It meant nothing. I love you, Alara. I love you." Hearing him say those words now felt like a desecration. "Love?" I asked, and for the first time a flicker of my cold fury showed. "You don't know the meaning of the word. You don't love me. You love the idea of me. You love the life we were building. But you didn't love me enough to be honest. You didn't respect me enough to be faithful." I stood up. "The wedding is off, Leo. I've canceled everything." His head snapped up, his eyes wide with a new kind of panic. "Canceled? No, Alara, please. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can." "There is no we," I stated, the words falling like stones into a well. "There is you and there is me. And you need to pack your things. I want you out of this house by the end of the day." He stared at me dumbfounded. "Out? But this is my house too." "Then I suggest you contact a lawyer," I said coldly. "But for now you will leave. I will not spend another night under the same roof as you." I left him there, weeping at the kitchen table, and went upstairs to my office. The hardest part was over. Now for the final piece of the plan. For Clara. I had spent the previous weekend preparing her gift. I had bought a large, beautiful gift box, the kind you would use for a special wedding present, lined with white satin tissue paper. Inside I placed a binder, a heavy 2-inch white binder. I had printed every single invoice, every single contract. I had organized them meticulously, with labeled tabs for each vendor, venue, catering, photography, music, flowers. In front of each section of invoices, I placed the corresponding planning documents, the notes from our meetings, the emails we had exchanged. I used a highlighter to mark every place where Clara had offered an opinion, made a suggestion, or given her enthusiastic approval. Her digital fingerprints were all over the creation of this monstrous bill. "Let's go with the raspberry," It's more passionate. Highlighted. The conservatory is magical. It has to be this one. Highlighted. The candid photographer is a must. It's all about the raw emotion. Highlighted. On top of the binder, I placed a simple, elegant card. On the front, in beautiful calligraphy, it said, "A gift for my dearest friend." Inside, I wrote a short, simple message. "Clara, you put so much time, effort, and passion into helping me plan my wedding. It seems only fair that you should have a little something to remember it by. Since you were so intimately involved in every decision, I thought you would appreciate having a complete record of the final costs associated with the project you helped create. I've canceled the wedding. You, of all people, should understand why. I believe this is yours, Alara." And for the final perfect touch, I went to a photo printing shop. I had one of the pictures from the Project Nightingale album printed in high gloss, 8x10 format. I chose the selfie, the one where they were both grinning, triumphant and secretive, in that cheap motel room. I placed that photo right on top of the card, the first thing she would see when she opened the box. I sealed the box with a beautiful silk ribbon. It looked like a thoughtful, generous wedding gift. I didn't want to deliver it myself. That would be too confrontational, too emotional. This was a business transaction. So, I hired a professional courier service. I scheduled the delivery for 6 p.m. that evening, a time when I knew she would be home from work. After Leo had packed his bags, a pathetic collection of suitcases and boxes, and left the house in a shroud of defeated silence, I sat alone in my living room. The quiet was different now. It was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful. It was clean. At 6:05 p.m. my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the courier service. "Your package has been successfully delivered and signed for." I closed my eyes. I imagined this scene. Clara, coming home from work, finding a large, beautifully wrapped box on her doorstep. Her curiosity. Her surprise. Perhaps she would think it was an early wedding gift from a mutual friend. I imagined her taking it inside, setting it on her coffee table, untying the perfect silk ribbon, lifting the lid, and seeing their faces. Her face, Leo's face, grinning up at her from that glossy 8x10 photograph. The sudden gut-wrenching shock. The confusion. The dawning, sickening realization that I knew. Then I imagined her picking up the card, her hands trembling, reading my calm, polite, devastating words, and finally opening the binder, seeing the first invoice. The conservatory, $15,000. Flipping the page. The caterer, $12,500. Page after page after page of financial ruin. A debt built on her own recommendations, her own false enthusiasm. The total bill was just shy of $50,000. The price of her treachery. Did I expect her to pay it? Not really. The point wasn't the money. The money was just the medium. The point was the message. The point was that I was not a victim to be pitied. I was not a woman to be scorned. I was the architect of my own justice. The revenge wasn't in the invoice. It was in the cold, calculated act of sending it. It was in taking the beautiful thing they had helped me build, the thing they had corrupted from the inside out, and handing them the bill for its demolition. It was showing her in black and white the exact cost of what she had done. I never heard from Leo again, except through lawyers as we untangled our shared assets. I never heard from Clara at all. Not a text, not a call, not an email. Just silence. I heard through the grapevine that she had to sell her condo and move back in with her parents. Whether it was because of the bill or because her life simply imploded, I don't know. And I found I didn't care. Her story, their story, was over for me. My story, however, was just beginning. In the weeks and months that followed, I learned to live in the quiet. I sold the forever house. It was tainted with memories that no longer belonged to me. I moved into a small, bright apartment in a part of the city I'd never explored. I took the money that would have been spent on a wedding and I bought a plane ticket. And then another. And another. I traveled. I saw mountains that pierced the clouds and oceans that stretched to the edge of the world. I learned to be alone not as a state of lack but as a state of wholeness. I rediscovered who I was without the reflection of a partner or a best friend to define me. I found that I was stronger, more resilient, and far more capable than I had ever given myself credit for. The betrayal was a fire that burned my life to the ground. But from those ashes something new grew. Something truer. My revenge wasn't just sending that box. My revenge was my survival. My revenge was my happiness. My revenge was building a new life on a foundation of my own making. One that was solid, honest, and entirely mine. That is my revenge arc. Thank you for listening to my story here on her revenge arc. Betrayal often comes in a disguise of love or friendship, and its discovery can feel like the end of the world. But sometimes, the end of one world is simply the necessary clearing of ground for a new one to be built. I'd like to leave you with a question to reflect on. Have you ever had a moment of profound clarity that emerged from chaos? A moment that showed you a strength you never knew you possessed? Share your thoughts and your own stories of resilience in the comments below. Your experiences give strength to others. And if this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribing to the channel for more stories of justice and rebirth. Until next time, be well and be the architect of your own arc.